All right, let's get into it. We're going to be talking about a brand new kind of AI, one that doesn't just give you an answer, but actually learns from its own mistakes. So what if an AI could learn from its mistakes? You know, just like we do. Imagine your AI assistant hits a wall on a tricky task. Instead of just stopping, it actually thinks, okay, what went wrong there, and figures out how to do it better the next time. That's the big idea we're diving into.
Okay, so first up, an AI that learns. Now, to really get why this is a game changer, we have to look at what's holding back the AI assistants we use today.
You know, today's AI assistants, they're pretty great at simple one-shot tasks. You ask what's the weather, or who won the game last night, and boom, you get an answer. But the moment a task gets a little more complex, when it needs to do multiple things in a row, like, say, search for something, then do a quick calculation, and then compare all the results, that's where they really start to struggle.
Take a look at this question. On the surface, it seems pretty straightforward, right? But here's the kicker. This is exactly the kind of question that trips up a normal AI. Think about all the steps involved. First, it has to find a list of the right hotels. Then, it needs to check the latest currency exchange rate. After that, it has to calculate the final price for each hotel, probably including taxes. And only then can it start comparing distances to find the nearest one. It's that whole sequence that's the real problem.
And that's exactly where this new approach, called MetaAgent, comes into the picture. It's built on a really cool and honestly very human idea, learning by doing. It literally starts out as a complete novice, like someone on their first day at a new job, and it just gets better and better by actually doing the work, one task at a time.
All right, Section 2, the novice's first steps. So, how does this journey from beginner to expert even start? Let's take a look at what the MetaAgent does on day 1 when it's basically a blank slate.
The workflow for the novice is super simple. And really, it's a lot like what we do. First, it just tries to solve the problem itself. But here's the cool part. The second it gets stuck, the moment it realizes, hey, I'm missing something here, it just stops. And it asks for help just using plain language. That question then gets sent to something called a tool router, which is basically a dispatcher that finds the right tool for that specific job.
So here's what you got to remember about the novice AI. On the one hand, it can totally reason step by step. But on the other hand, it can't learn from its experience yet, and it has no idea how to use specific tools. It doesn't know what a web search is or how a calculator works. All it knows is how to ask when it needs something.
Okay, Section 3. This is where it gets really interesting, how the AI gets smarter. So, let's break down how this beginner AI transforms itself into an expert. It's all about self-improvement.
The official name for this is meta-tool learning. But really, you can just think of it as the AI learning on the job. We're not talking about rewriting the AI's basic code or anything like that. Instead, it's all about building up a personal library of experiences, a collection of I've seen this before moments that help it make better decisions down the road.
And the process is actually pretty straightforward. After every single task, and it doesn't matter if it passed or failed, the AI goes through this little self-reflection routine. It basically asks itself a few key questions. What did I do right? Where did I mess up? Can I make a general rule from this? And, most importantly, how can I do this better next time? It's like a built-in post-mortem.
And this process actually works. Here's a real-world example of a rule it came up with. After one attempt where it failed because it missed a tiny detail, it generated this new principle for itself: total constraint compliance. Basically, every single requirement is a mandatory filter. Don't ever skip one. And boom, that rule gets saved and becomes part of its core strategy from then on.
But just thinking about mistakes isn't enough. That's only half of it. The other key is that the AI builds its own in-house tools. Now, what that really means is it's building a long-term memory. It saves the entire raw history of every single thing it does with the tool. It's kind of like a scientist keeping all of their messy lab notes instead of just the final polished paper. This creates this incredibly rich personal knowledge base it can tap into later.
Okay, let's move on. An expert in action. So we've talked about the theory, but what does this actually look like in practice? Let's check out a case study that really shows this transformation from novice to expert.
So the challenge was this: find the color of a building. Sounds simple, but it came with seven really specific and complex constraints. We're talking about things like when it opened, its exact size, who the architect was, even the size of the plot of land it was built on. Any single one of those details would be enough to confuse a regular AI.
So, let's compare. The first try, as a novice, it came back with the wrong answer: silver gray. Why? Because it completely missed one of the key constraints, the site size. But then it did its reflection thing. On the second try, as an expert, it remembered that rule it made for itself: total constraint compliance. It methodically went through and checked every single constraint. And by doing that, it found the right answer: copper. It's a perfect before and after.
All right, next section, the future of AI assistants. And look, what we're seeing here is way more than just a neat party trick. This really points to a huge shift in how we should be building and even thinking about AI assistants in the future. And the numbers absolutely back this up. They tested it on this super difficult benchmark called BrowseCamp, which is full of these really tricky multi-step problems. A standard AI agent, it scored a 0.8, barely anything. A specially trained agent did a bit better, a 2.7. But MetaAgent, by learning from its own experiences, it scored a 7.1. I mean, that's not just a little better, that's a massive lead.
And that really gets to the heart of it. The real breakthrough here isn't just about building a smarter model from the get-go. The key is creating a model that knows how to learn. It's a system that gets better on its own, a system that learns how to learn.
And you know what's cool? You can actually use this same exact logic in your own life. When you're up against a really complex problem, try thinking like MetaAgent. First, break that big problem down into smaller, manageable pieces. Second, be real with yourself about what you don't know and go find the help or information you need. And third, maybe the most important step, after you're done, just take a minute to reflect. Ask yourself, what went well, what didn't, and what's my takeaway for next time?
So that leaves me with a question for you. As this kind of technology keeps getting better, what's that one really complex, annoying, multi-step task in your own work or your life that you wish you could just hand off to an AI that could actually learn and master it for you? I'd love to hear your thoughts.